Hey everyone, welcome to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I have a very special and brilliant, inspiring guest with me here today. For those of you out there who maybe haven't made a full leap to doing your healing modality or your practice, your hobby business as your main gig yet, I want to share a little bit of wisdom and inspiration. I have a masterful leader and brilliant entrepreneur with me on the line today who is still walking in the world of the corporate zone while still being a awakening spiritual enlightenment force for good in the world. So I wanted to share some of her wisdom with you, and hang tight for just a sec. We'll be back with more about her. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Awesome. So J.Caresse, am I saying that right?
Almost, Caresse.
Okay, let me start over. So, J.Caresse is the host of the Connecting the Dots podcast, which is the intermix between mindset, spiritual transformation, and entrepreneurship. She's also the founder of J.Caresse and Company, which is an IT project management firm with the goal of bridging the gap between consciousness, self and team performance, and technology. Jessica's mission is to inspire others to listen to their inner voice, take bold action, take bold, decisive action, and to build a life and career that aligns with their deepest values. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and I want to just go back for a second because you are an entrepreneur. I think you're working more in a corporate sphere than most of my guests generally are. So I wanted this to be a little bit of a shout out to anybody who's still working a corporate job and feeling this mystical, magical pull inside of them that it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge career shift when you have that awakening start to happen inside of you. And I think that you're a really beautiful model of that. Would you share a little bit about your journey of how you got into what you're doing now as a career, but also share some of your, stepping into the spiritual side of things experience?
Yeah. So a little bit of background about myself. So I grew up Christian. I grew up in a Pentecostal household. And so, the word God was always used all the time, but it didn't make sense to me much as a kid because it's like, how is there a man in the clouds, going to condemn and brimstone and fire and you're a sinner going to hell? And you have to suffer. Those type of belief systems just didn't resonate with me. And so and as I progressed in life, there was a period in my life where I wouldn't call myself a Christian just because I didn't identify with what I saw in the church. And so in my career, so I fell into project management. I started off as just like a reporting analyst, but my dreams were like, when growing up, my dreams were like, I want to be a singer and I want to be a painter and fashion design. So like I was naturally inclined to go towards the arts. But my parents, they're in the healthcare field and they're also Jamaican. And so all that stuff wasn't real. Those aren't real career choices. So I was initially going to be pre-med. I was like, nope. And then I went into business instead. And then I started off as a reporting analyst and then got into systems and then project management and then just various types of project management. And all of that was W-2, but I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like I had a lot of energy, but then in the corporate setting, like you have people who are, I don't know, they have their own thing. And so they kind of break you down. They break you down, break it down, break it down, break it down. And so growing up, like not really knowing what God really means, and then going from so much full of life, full of energy to kind of having my soul sucked from corporate, I found myself at a really pivotal point last year where I'm like, I'm tired. And then I came across this book called Power versus Force, and it had recontextualized what it meant to have a relationship with God, source, universe, consciousness, whatever, fill in the blank. But honestly, like it's even hard for me to describe God because you can't, you can't. But I just use the word God just because it's just, maybe a universal term, but for me, my definition of God is the undescribable creator of everything that we see and do not see.
Beautiful. Awesome. I love that you shared a bit of like the journey of, I don't want to say being should upon, but that's kind of what it is. It's like we all have some sort of outside influence saying that's irrational, the things you'd want won't work out, and that even with going down a route that was maybe more digestible by your parents, that you still found there was an opening for more of you to come through, or an opening for more of the magic or the consciousness or that God force energy to find its way to you. And so I think you are doing a really excellent job of bridging that side of yourself with your corporate career pathway now. Would you share a little bit more of just like, what does that look like?
Yes, yes, yes. So it's interesting because I was working two full-time jobs, W-2 employee, and I make that distinction because there's a difference. So like I was W-2 employee, I had someone, performance reviews and everything like that, where I felt that I had to act like how they wanted me to act. And so last year when I quit one of them. The other one, I reduced the amount of hours I was working, probably like 10 hours a week. So I basically, my whole day was open. And I was in like a quiet place for a couple of months, just really undoing, like really deconstructing my ego, getting rid of all the negative energy, getting rid of all the guilt, the shame, the pride, the control, the anger. And so then come February this year, I'm like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur because there's this huge vision in my heart that I know I need to help a lot of people in some type of way. I wasn't quite sure what that was at the beginning of the year. But in my journey of just trusting and letting go and surrendering, I started to see what it was. And my calling led me back into the corporate space, but as an independent consultant. And when you're positioned as an independent consultant, you're positioned as an outsider, you're positioned as someone with expertise, you're positioned as someone where they look to for advice, that you're looked at someone as the example for the W-2 employees within an organization. But then the other thing I noticed, because not all corporations have the same toxic, crazy environment that I was used to. It's like I found that as I was changing within myself, the type of people who I came across were also more loving and caring and open as well, and also have a more, spiritual, God-centered type of focus too. And so, like with the current client that I serve, like we have deep conversations with some of the people that I work with that I never had in any of the other places that I worked. So I'm like, okay, there's like something going on here. And then I'm like, okay, I see that I'm accepted and I'm sharing my beliefs with people. I'm leading more and more with my spiritual values, my honesty and integrity, and deconstructing your ego. And I'm finding more and more interest in what I have to say. So I'm like, huh, okay. I guess my calling's in the corporate space because I can't get out of it. But yet this is such a different experience.
Yeah, that phrase, I like to rephrase it as your vibe attracts your village. But it's
Yeah.
that once you're willing to be that energy, you're going to find more people to be that energy with, or who are going to match or expand or magnify or mirror back that same kind of frequency. And I love that that was your experience. But I also want to point out that there was a big leap of faith there where you
Yeah.
said, I don't know what's next yet, but I know this isn't it for me. And so for you, it looked like exiting a W-2 corporate job, which I imagine was like pretty good pay and
Hmm.
security and like known for
Hmm.
an unknown. And I think that everyone who goes into the entrepreneurial space, but definitely everybody who starts broadcasting a message from a more spiritual angle has to make some kind of a leap of faith like that. Whether it's like starting to show up on social media or show up with email marketing or show up with a broadcast of some kind for your endeavor, it can take a huge leap of saying, you know what, the safety and security of being invisible or hidden or unknown is no longer cutting it for me. It's no longer creating the reality that I want. And I'm aware that more is possible. And I'm going to have to jump over this gap or jump off this proverbial cliff
Yeah.
to get to something else. And we may not know what that something else is yet. And that's bold as hell. But the courage
Yes.
of doing that creates a new baseline for the courage you require for the next leap, because there may be
Yes.
a long series of them. Yeah,
Yes.
which is beautiful. It's beautiful to choose that, and it's scary as hell. And I just want to acknowledge like the courage, the bravery that it took
Thank
to make that leap, and also like celebrate with you the beauty that's unfolded since then, because that has been my experience as well. It seems like the end of the world, that's what a cliff jump is. And we're talking metaphorically. I'm not telling anyone to jump off a cliff. It looks like the end of the world. And
Yeah.
then you find what's beyond it, that you don't
Yes.
usually see what's beyond it until you go there.
Exactly, exactly. And oh my gosh, Molly, like I've had the best year of my life because I made such a drastic jump and just trusted.
Yeah. Yeah, and you discovered the next step as you came upon the requirement of that next step. Like it
Yes.
shows up, it occurs to you. You find an interest, you get curious, you come
Mm.
across a person who requires your services and you realize you're the person for that job. Let's
Yes.
show up and figure out, what do I charge for that now? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, let me take that step and figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. So one of the things you also added in was your beautiful podcast, Connecting the Dots, which I get to be a guest on too. We recorded that last week. I don't know when it'll air. Will you tell us a little bit about that show and what it's for, who it's for?
Yes. So your episode will air, I believe, the mid-November. Your episode will air. And so with connecting the dots, it was one of those things where, during the time where I quit my job, I had visited my girlfriend in LA and she had started up a podcast. And then I came back home and I was a guest on her podcast. And I came back home and then people were telling me I should start one. And considering that I just got over like a whole bunch of anxiety and overthinking and, not feeling great about myself. And I came on the other side of that. And they were like, I want to hear you speak. I want to hear your story. I'm like, are you sure? And then I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. It was never a goal of mine to start a podcast. But I did want a YouTube though. I did want a YouTube, but I never thought about a podcast. And so I was like, all right, I'm not doing anything else. Let me do this and see what happens. And so I started recording last year, November, with the goal of sharing my story, sharing what I went through to provide inspiration to other people to get over whatever it is they're going through too. Because as I was navigating my life, actually, I couldn't find information that was relevant to me. So I'm like, okay, let me put out information with the hopes that somebody somewhere will get something from it, even if it's just one person.
Yeah, I love that. As far as the like spiritual aspect of this, can you speak a little bit about I mean, share a little bit about that story of what was you mentioned finding that book, but like what was the catalyst? What was
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, yes. So during, I've always been very introspective. I've always journaled. And so last year I was tired of being tired and feeling like I have no energy, feeling drained. It would be extremely hard for me to leave the house. Even to wake up at 8 a.m. was so hard. Like it was just hard to move my body. I was tired. Like there was nothing that made me excited. I kind of felt really numb. And I'm like, there's this little thing. I'm like, God, I know there's something that I'm supposed to do. I have this vision of my future self, but my reality is not looking like it. And so I decided to be radically honest with myself and identified that one of the major cycles that was going on was the relationship with my mom. It was a yo yo cycle. And so I decided to describe what that cycle was in my journal. I'm actually releasing an episode about it. And you can see the screenshots on Friday on my podcast. But so I was journaling about the cycle where, she would love me up, tell me how much she misses me, loves me. And then I'm like, and it's always been like a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, okay, maybe she's different this time. Maybe we can get close. So I would, start talking to her more often. And then there would be some jab at me, like, oh, you need to get your life right with God type of thing. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Because I'm just listening to your life. Like, you don't even know mine, So and then other stuff would come up too. So I'm like, oh, I'm tired of this. I can't. And then I'll pull away. And so then I had Googled the cycle, like what's like a yo yo cycle with your mom type thing. And then I basically read that my personality was that of someone who was raised by some narcissistic traits. And not calling my mom a narcissist or anything like that, but in the Jamaican culture, like There's some narcissistic traits in the Jamaican culture, the Jamaican heritage from back in the day. So I was basically shattered reading like I used to pride myself on being a very strong, independent person, never ask for help, don't show any emotions. I don't address my emotions. I bury them deep down inside. I can do everything myself. And so I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God, everything I prided myself on is a survival mechanism. This is not me. So I felt shattered. I felt shattered. Like my whole thing was a facade. It wasn't real. It was just survival. So that's what really, 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 that was like the brick that made everything crumble, like from my ego. I'm like, I need to find who the real Jessica is because this ain't it. Like, I'm tired. My body's falling apart. Like, when I was 30 years old, I got shingles, for example. And that's something you're supposed to get when you're 50 and above, and, or unless you're under extreme stress. I got shingles, you know? So I'm like, this, and my body was aching, everything was slowly falling apart. So I'm like, okay, like, I need to heal. I need to find Jessica. And so then, like, I went down rabbit holes. I gave myself the permission to go down rabbit holes because I never did before because of my Christian upbringing. How, no, but never, you know, allowed myself to get into philosophy and to different avenues I never even gave myself permission to explore. And it just really expanded my mind. And I picked up meditating and more spiritual books and really applied it. You know, I really applied the practices to my life. And slowly but surely, all the stuff that used to plague me faded away.
That was a really big thing you kind of threw away there, which was I applied it. It's like so many of us personal growth junkies are like hooked on getting it intellectually, but not embodying, integrating the practices. Even like one book, one personal development book is going to be rich with suggestions about practices or habits or ideas that you can actually implement and integrate into your life. But we think, oh, that was interesting. Let me move on to the next one.
Yeah.
When there's like a wealth of change and a reason probably that you picked up that book in the first place. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I totally get it. I had a alcoholic narcissist stepfather growing up, and most of my 20s was figuring out how to unwind myself from that. And
Mm,
I'd say most of my 30s has been about the nervous system regulation and
mm,
recognizing that, yeah, same thing. A lot of my personality was just my coping mechanisms. And
mhm.
that if I take those little pieces away and find ways to heal and release them, or transform my relationship to them, that I get to reveal more of who I truly am. And like,
Yeah.
what a gift. What a gift to give yourself that space to get curious, that space to go down those rabbit holes, that space to actually put things into practice and see what it creates. Because you never know, not every tool is going to work for every person, but your
Yeah.
willingness to show up for one that's right in front of you and see how can this support me? What could be different if I use it?
Hmm.
That's such a power move.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because, like, with project management, mind you, it wasn't a goal. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't a goal of mine at all. But it taught me a lot of different skills, one of which is where you take an idea and figure out how to make it come to life.
Mm.
And so it's like I kind of applied that to myself, right? The goal was to have more love in my life. The goal was to let go of guilt. And so it's so funny, like when you really commit to your journey and just say, okay, this is what it is, you'll find these little trinkets of information to help you along the way. And I just remembered now there was one book I had listened to. It's called The Kabillion. I actually got the suggestion for that book from my Instagram algorithm. So I always tell people I love my Instagram algorithm. And so it was talking about, okay, what you're seeing on the outside is probably what's going on the inside. So I was like, um, deep inside and identify these emotions that I was like pressing down, like, no, you don't exist, you know? And so I allowed myself to let them out. And yeah, that's how I was able to apply things, you know, between that and then the learned skill of project management of actually taking action to get things done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge one. I feel like that's what people pay me for is to help them take the action to get things done. And yeah, to apply that to your personal spiritual development is it's extraordinary. And I don't mean that, I mean that in the extra beyond ordinary. That and it I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't, but I also feel like we're at a really beautiful pivotal shift in consciousness right now on the planet where it's becoming less ordinary or it's
Yeah.
becoming more ordinary to take an idea and think this might be the change for me and actually go figure out how do I put this into practice? How do I implement it? Were there any like specific habit shifts or practices that you started that felt like they opened up more space for you?
Yeah, I made it a point to read every single day in the morning and at night. I made it a point to have my quiet time. I made it a point to not sleep with my phone in the room, actually, as well. I forgot about those practices because, like, when I was going through all of my anxiety, overthinking, I would feel like I had white fuzzies in my head. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to sleep with my phone on the other side of the room. And then the fuzziness went away.
Mhm.
And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go a little bit more extreme. I'm not gonna sleep with it in the room, and I'm gonna get a regular alarm clock, right? So like making sure that I'm not on my phone first thing in the morning, giving myself space to be quiet, read, meditate, pray, whatever it is. When I wake up and right before I go to bed it keeps me centered.
Yeah, it's a total game changer. I also write before I get out of bed. Well, nowadays I write after I get out of bed, but still in the morning and write at night before I go to sleep. And I love the idea of taking the phone out of the room altogether. And yes, it would require getting an alarm clock. I feel like that's a really easy excuse for most people is, well, I need it for my alarm. And it's like, okay, yeah, but then your alarm went off and boom, you're in Instagram. It's like,
Yeah,
give yourself at least a little bit of an edge on the dopamine addiction that social media can be. And yeah, buy a $5 alarm clock, see what that creates. I love
exactly.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, what are the best ways for people to come and follow you, watch your podcast? Like, where should people go to look deeper?
Yeah. So you could find me everywhere at Jessica_Caresse. That's Caresse. That's on Instagram, TikTok. I'm kind of going through this thing on Facebook. My last name is Demidovich, so that's my husband's that's my husband's last name. But if you can just put in Jessica Caresse, you can find me anywhere, honestly. Like I'll pop up on Facebook too. And then my website, like if you need any help with your project management, technology, automations, whatever it is, operations needs to be streamlined. That's where we come in. So that's J.Caresse and Company. So the website is jcaresse.com. So it's JCARESSE.com.
Awesome. And we'll put that link in the show notes for y'all as well. And definitely go, you're already watching this somewhere where podcasts are streaming. Go look up Connecting the Dots podcast, give it a follow. And if this was inspiring at all, or if you know somebody who's maybe having an awakening or maybe in the corporate space and feeling that tension, forward this episode to them. Give them a little gift of a share that might. You've shared so much wisdom and magic already. Jessica, is there any last words of wisdom you want to leave people with?
I would just say believe in yourself, believe in that little tiny voice that's nagging at you with the same message over and over that's probably been nagging at you for years and make the leap, have courage, make the leap. Life is short. You don't want to have to come back here to do this all over again. So really believe in yourself, believe in yourself, believe in yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening and watching. And whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action because you are here for a reason. We'll see you next time.